who's sharing and who are doing those things that are equally as important. And I think that's particularly true when you work in science or research communications. It's a validation when someone calls out the good work you've done from that field. It's really important to our researchers as well and employees. So it's probably a little bit, I think it's a hard thing to only look at numbers. It's also what's behind those numbers and who's doing things. If we've gained and someone, that we're excited about, says something, that's a really big win for us. It feels really like, oh, okay, we're being noticed, or we're on the radar of the right people as well. So I actually started my career as a journalist, working, completely dating myself here, but working in newspapers and journalism for the first 10 to 12 years of my career. So I'd been on that side of the house, working with communicators, marketing folks, distilling information, understanding my audiences and who, what stories were important for people, what news did they want to consume, what was important for that particular community. And, after a while, I love newspaper. I still love journalism. I love journalists, follow that pretty closely, very much so. But decided that I needed to do something different for my family, just a lot. There was layoffs happening in newspapers, and decided to do something different, and ended up working at a national laboratory, a national research laboratory for the U.S. Department of Energy, or it's a U.S. Department of Energy National Laboratory in Idaho. And got a job working in communications, and had the view that a lot of journalists did at that point of what we thought communications did, call journalists and ask them to write stories, versus what they actually do, which is far more in-depth and complex. So I started working at a national laboratory, Idaho National Laboratory, working in science communications, which is difficult to, you're trying to communicate really complex topics to people that aren't as familiar with them. And so that totally changed the trajectory of what I'm doing. I've worked in science communications since really 2008, working with projects on renewable energy, clean energy, nuclear energy, working at a university, covering everything from physics to natural sciences, biology, breakthroughs in biomedical. And a few years ago, I was looking for a change and a challenge, and responded to a job in quantum computing, which has been by far probably the biggest challenge of my career, learning this area. And that's part of what I really like to do, is I like to learn about new science and technologies and then communicate them effectively. So I've been working in quantum computing. This is my third year working in quantum computing. So it's been definitely by far the most complex topic that I've had to communicate about. We're very much a small company. We're a small startup. We are newer to the quantum computing field. Atom computing is. We have a really specific technology that's, there's certain technologies in quantum computing that are probably more well-known, superconducting and trapped ion qubits. And we're a newer company. We have a different modality or architecture, qubits, for our technology that we're developing. And at Atom Computing, we're very small. I say we're small but mighty. We do a lot with very little. I am the marketing communications department. I work with agencies on specific needs and help, but a large part of what I do is communicating, doing the marketing communications for the company with various audiences. So it's a pretty big role. I get to help with a lot of different items, and because I come from a research organization background, I do actually a lot of work with helping set up, working with the technical team on collaborations with researchers as well. I've been at Atom Computing for a little over 6 months, or just coming on that, and worked at another quantum computing company before that. And I think quantum computing is a very interesting area. And when we talk about campaigns, a lot of folks talk about, digital campaigns and marketing campaigns. And I think for this stage of the technology, it's very early stage technology. I think it looks very different than what most people think about in terms of product marketing and communications. And I would say that because the audience is very different, right? There's people who understand quantum computing. That's a very small group. And because it's this early stage and we're trying to bring on people, one, we have to tell people what it is and why it might be useful for them. But our audience is very different, right? We're in this early adoption stage of this technology, proving out the technology. So it's really driven things differently, I believe. Like, for example, we have a scientific audience, right? People who've worked in the quantum computing field for a long time, academics, they've been doing research on this for a long time. So sometimes I would call them less campaigns, but more of our targeted communications and marketing is around, and I would say probably more communications is around, engaging with those audiences, because we have, doing peer-reviewed articles, talking about in a very authentic, technically accurate way, but trying to be accessible. We accomplish something technically. What does that mean? Providing enough data that the scientific community can say, yep, they did it, and having the conversations that are extremely relevant in that world, because it's what we don't want to do is engage in hype and oversell what we've done, any of that, because that's important in the world that we live in. At the same token, we're doing a lot of work, educating stakeholders and investors, and I would say even government, because a lot of governments are investing heavily in quantum computing. And frankly, the next layer of users, which are researchers, particularly subject matter experts in their own field. So for example, you might have a computational chemist working on molecular interactions. And how we communicate with these different audiences is we have to be able to explain how we talk with the quantum computing ecosystem and the academia and about our breakthroughs are very different than how we're going to talk to potentially somebody who's working in pharma or with, on energy catalysts about molecular interactions. And so, this is a tool for them. It's a potential tool and how that could help them in what they're doing. At the same token, then we're working on the government relations side and talking to people about our particular architecture, why we think it's going to scale, talking to investors about quantum computing and why it's exciting, why it really is where AI and machine learning were not too long ago, what that next breakthrough looks like. So I think it's a very different than because of the stage of the technology, because people hear the word quantum physics and that sounds scary. It's a lot more about educating than true, rolling out a 2.0 version of a marketing product or a more mature consumer product. It's not just about, I'm talking a lot about communications and communicating to specific audiences, but those campaigns are important and whether we're reaching them. Our people actually, we can put out a lot of different information, we can engage, we can do those things, but we have to be able to measure if it's working and who those audience, if we're reaching them, if it's making sense, any of that sort of stuff. And so that's where the data comes in all the time. We're always looking at data to say, okay, what was the engagement? What was the click-through rate? What are we seeing with a particular piece of, in a campaign or a piece of content or any of that stuff? Are we reaching the audiences that we want to reach? And if we're not, why? Is it, can we try something different? Can we adjust tactics? Maybe it's that particular audience isn't ready. Or that's not the format or medium that we're getting to them on. That's not the right way. It's not going to be an in-mail message or going to be a blog post. It's going to be more, okay, what if we have a webinar? What if we do engagement? What does that look like? And I think that's where the data really comes in, and getting feedback from people. Okay, all right, why didn't this go well? Did we not target correctly? Did we not look at the right outlets, the right channels? What happened that this did not perform as well as we thought? And so I think there's a lot of that happens. And like I said, because these segments are so different, who we're talking to, we have to really look across what these different channels and, what we're looking at for an audience that's more general, vastly different than an audience that is more technical for us. So we're constantly always looking and seeing, okay, did this work? Does this make sense? And also because it's such a complex topic, it's changed a lot. When I first started working in quantum computing, I think it's gotten to be, people have heard it more. They've heard the term more. There's more coverage and excitement. And what is this? It's kind of taking root. But still, where a couple years ago, people would have said, what are you talking about? Like, why are we even talking about this? And it felt a lot more scary. Now it's exciting. But also, are they understanding our message? Are they, so I think there's a lot of work to be done, and having data to be able to look and see, okay, what happened? This was something that was particularly engaging. Okay, let's do some analysis. Why was it? And who were the audiences? Who did engage with it? Are they the ones that we were trying to target? So I would say, particularly right now for the stage of quantum computing and atom computing, I think probably one of the biggest objectives for us is for brand recognition, right? Brand awareness, brand recognition, that we are in the quantum game and we are a player in the quantum game. There's big companies, IBM, Google, Honeywell has Quantinuum, IonQ. There's a lot of players internationally in the quantum field. So there are two things really for atom computing. We're a newer sort of architecture, a lesser known architecture in quantum computing. So we have to, one, educate about our technology and why we're taking the approach we're doing and why we think it's successful. And then we're a really small company. We don't have the same brand recognition and awareness as an IBM or Google. So we have to do a lot of work in, working with people on, in particular in the PR world, working with a lot of, folks who are covering bloggers, analysts, doing a lot of groundwork with people, helping them understand, some of these people are familiar with quantum computing, some aren't. And even if they are, they may not understand our approach to it. So we're doing a lot of work to try to lay that groundwork and understand, here's why the neutral atom approach to quantum computing is important, why people believe it is a promising technology to scale. So there's really sort of two things. There's one, our technological approach, which is newer, and people aren't as familiar with, so doing a lot of education around that. And then why atom computing in particular, why we are a player. So even among the companies that are taking this approach, why we are a leader. And so there's sort of these two things that are happening, right? So like I said, we've only been around for a couple of years. And so one of the measures that we really look at is, when people are mentioning, I know it sounds like a small thing, but it's a big thing when you're in PR, is that when a reporter or blogger or journalist is writing about something and they're saying, these are the emerging players and we're listed, right? And we may not, even something that we may not have been interviewed, they're doing a piece about generally quantum computing and they mention us as an emerging player, that's significant for us because it means that they know about us, they're familiar with what we're doing, and we are doing our work successfully, that we're just growing our own brand recognition and awareness about what's happening. We are a player. Those are exciting things. We recently, there was a story in Popular Science about neutral atom quantum computing, and we were listed, and we recently won a big award through the US federal government. Those are big things for us because even though we weren't interviewed for that article, the fact that we were on their radar indicates that what we're doing is we're making progress in what we're trying to do. And from a business objective, you have to have that. People aren't going to, whether we go after a government grant or investors, you have to have stuff, it's, in some ways it's validation when those folks write about you, right? You are a serious player, you are in the game, you are doing things that are making a difference, and you need to be taken seriously. And so from a business objective point of view, that is important. because if we're not known, how are people ever going in? The only people who know about us, it's not bad from a technical perspective, but from a business objective, when we partner with somebody, when we win a grant or an award, or if people are writing about us, they're starting to pay attention. Those are important. Whether you're an investor, you happen to, you're interested in quantum computing and you want to invest and you've seen us in popular science, those things just help with our recognition of our company and our technology. So first of all, having worked in science orgs, you have to love data, because that's how you, even internally when you're interacting, data is important, right? I learned that early on in different parts of my career working with researchers. I mean, that's fine. You can give them, this is really cool, but you have to have data and show, and not just have the data, but interpret it, have data over time and look and see what's going on. At the same time, it's also about, metrics are a funny thing, right? Because so I really look at, so let me back up. So metrics, they're KPI, all of that stuff is wonderful, but it's also doing the interpretation. I just don't want to look at the number. I want to see what's deeper, what is happening. Am I seeing a trend over time? Are we starting to get traction in a certain area? What are we seeing? So for example, so sometimes it's not always just a number. Sometimes it is just being mentioned in an article that said, yeah, here's, a list of emerging promising quantum players, and we're listed because we're top of mind to that particular, we've raised our profile enough with a particular, market, journalist, analyst, whatever, that we're mentioned in the same company as the bigger players. So to me, I know that might sound odd to people, but it's sort of the combination between the numbers, and that's a proof point that what we're doing is working, right? That they are paying attention. People are recognizing who we are. And yes, it would be better if we could be, an interview, but it also means that in some ways we're well known enough that we're considered a player in the field. So it seems, it probably sounds odd to people because you want to be the front, the primary story and all of that, but it also is sort of indicates that you're on the radar, you're in the game, you're in the field. At the same token, though, the metrics, I think, are what you have to look at the metrics, right? And for me, I'm really looking at engagement, probably more than anything. I mean, it depends on what we're doing. I'm looking at engagement, or I'm looking at pickup. If it's PR and we've sent out information, or what kind of pickup are we getting? Who's picking up information? Our influencers in the market picking up on what we're saying. For example, we recently were awarded we were selected for an award through DARPA, a big federal project in the US. And there was a researcher who has a very large following on Twitter, and very well known in the quantum world, John Preskill, and he, gave us a shout out with the other people who won. Well, that's, that watching those metrics and watching then people engage on Twitter and who he's, basically introduced atom computing to, and watching that is really important. But also engagement, right? I mean, I always talk about engagement a lot because it's easy to like something, like a post, but engaging and sharing and reposting and, those things are probably more important to me because they show a deeper interest, and also who is doing it. I recently had a conversation with somebody and they're like, well, you can get a lot more likes and followers. That's true. And those things are important, but it's also who's following us and who's promoting, who's sharing and who are doing those things that are equally as important. And I think that's particularly true when you work in science or research communications. It's a validation when someone calls out good work you've done from that field. It's really important to our researchers as well and employees. So it's probably a little bit, I think it's a hard thing to only look at numbers. It's also what's behind those numbers and who's doing things. If we've gained and someone, that we're excited about, says something, that's a really big win for us. It feels really like, oh, okay, we're being noticed, or we're on the radar of the right people as well. that is a question everybody's fielding, I think, and particularly, I think it's particularly true in quantum computing from the sense that this is a technologies take a while to come to market, to commercialize. There's a lot of talk about what quantum computing can do, and I think there's a big role for marketing or for PR and comms to level set where we're at with this technology and be very forthright about, yes, this is an extremely promising technology. We are making headway and actually helping to clarify what that headway means, right? Because people want to go from here's this thing to, we've done this huge breakthrough, but that's not always, you have to provide context in what that means. And I think that's where PR and comms comes into play very much so. What is the true state of the technology? Where are we at? Where are we headed? What does this look like in this kind of, economic environment? The reality is in quantum computing, there are headlines right now about people being laid off, the cutbacks, all that stuff. But if you look at numbers beyond that, global investment in quantum computing is on the rise. Venture, private investment, government investment, there's a lot going on. There's actually a lot of really cool things happening. So you have to do a lot of work to get past the headline of economic downturn. Yes, these things have happened, but there's also a lot of really, it's an exciting time to be in quantum computing. There are big things happening. And yeah, it's not the same type of headline. It's easier to write a headline about, and I get it. I understand, I came from that world, about these things, and people are worried. But at the same token, I also think it's an opportunity for companies to say, look, like for example, at Atom Computing, we're very focused on quantum computing hardware. That's what we do. That's what we're focused on. That's what we're going to do. We are going to deliver the best, highest performing, systems that we think you need to solve these problems. And here are the specs, and here's what we're working on, and here's why we're making progress against our technological goals, and remaining very focused on that and what it means for this technology to progress, right? And I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about Atom Computing is we're very focused on what we're doing. And also the fact that, yeah, we get asked those questions too. And we have to say, look, we're doing what we can. We're remaining focused. We're not gonna go off into these other areas, but also to give people context in where quantum computing is. Yes, it is scary. People talk about a quantum winter coming, but really when you look at the numbers and you look at what's happening, countries all over the world, India, all over are investing heavily in quantum computing because they see that it's the future. And what does that mean and how can we play a part? We're a hardware company, but how do we, if there's a partner or places we can support? It's exciting to see it actually. And I feel like it's kind of a bump. It is a bump and it's not unexpected. It's just, if you look at where quantum computing was 3 years ago to now, it's vastly different. It's on people's radar. People are talking about it. They're investing. So it's also kind of keeping those two things in perspective for people. I think for me, it's to be curious and to really get to know, to be willing to learn and always be willing to learn. Because look, I told you I'm completely dating myself when I started off. And the world has radically shifted. The channels we have available to us now. When I started in journalism, people called newspapers to get stories. Now you have your own channels, and it's amazing, like just to see how much the world's changed. But be willing to learn and to adapt to that. From a MarCom perspective, a PR or communications, like really understanding what those tools are. Be willing to embrace that, learn about them. You don't have to, you're not going to be an expert in everything, but you do need to understand, be willing to learn and adapt. The second thing is, I think if you're going to work in a particular industry or, where I've worked in science fields with researchers, is to really spend time to understand what they do, why they do it, and really understand that space. And it's okay to not know. I'm not a quantum physicist. I'm not going to be, but I can spend enough time learning and understanding a technology and where we're at, and you have to. right? How can I, get these messages out and provide context if I myself don't understand it? But I also think just genuinely being curious and interested in what researchers are doing or working on goes a long ways. They like to talk about it. They want to talk about it. I think that's part of the reason I always like being a journalist too. I like to understand those things and ask people why they do it, what they did. And I still think that's really important for PR and comms. When I talk to our researchers, I'm always astounded by how they got into this, why they do it, what makes them excited.